Hello everybody, my name is Arush Shangari, and in this video we'll be covering the basics of Python. Python is a programming language developed in 1989. It is commonly used for developing websites and software, task automation, and data analysis. There are many reasons why to learn Python. Python is easy to learn. Its syntax is especially easy, and the code is very readable and it's easy to understand. Additionally, Python allows you to write programs in fewer lines of code compared to most of the other programming languages out there. And finally, the popularity of Python is growing rapidly. Now it's one of the most popular programming languages out there. In fact, it is the main language for several major companies such as Google, Yahoo, and Dropbox, and it's a secondary language or backup language for several other major companies such as Amazon. Currently, there are two versions of Python widely used, Python 2.x and Python 3.x. Among the two, Python 3.x is generally better because it's updated and it's a newer version. In this video, we'll be using Python 3.9. Python 3.9 is currently the latest version of Python, the newest version. Now that we've talked about what Python is and what it can be used for, let's get started in coding in Python. Now we'll learn how to run Python successfully on our computer. Once we do that, we'll also be writing our first Python program. So we're going to be using Replit.com. Replit.com is an IDE or integrated development environment where you develop programs on a public environment. So if you type in replit.com, replit.com, it should bring you to this page, and make sure to click the blue icon, which is Start Coding Now, which states Start Coding Now. It should bring you to, not that page, it should bring you to a sign up page, which basically it just asks for the username, email, and password. For the password, all you have to do is add a few digits, text, and a symbol. Make sure to do that. And then once you sign up, it should bring you to this page. So when you click on the page My REPLs, and then once you do that, now here's how we create our own program. Click the blue plus icon, and once you click that, it should tell you create a REPL. And basically, so you just type in, if this doesn't show you, I commonly use Python, so you just search Python if it doesn't pop up, and then Python is right here, and then it tells you to name your title. Just name it anything like practice, for example. The name of the REPL won't affect the code, so you don't have to worry over there. And then when you create your REPL, it should go to a separate page for the program and let it load. It may take like a minute, maybe half a minute. Just depends on your computer. Okay, now it's loaded. So now we can write our first program. Okay, so now we're going to learn about print statements. So this is the first topic in this Python course. And keep in mind, this is part 1 of the course. I might be doing part 2 and so on. So now we're going to be learning about print statements. So basically, a print statement is probably the easiest one in Python, but it's also one of the most important because it's probably going to be the most used thing in your program. So it will come in handy later in this course and in the future too. The print does exactly what it sounds like. It simply just prints text on the screen. And not just text, it can be numbers, it could be Boolean values, it could be anything. And you can just print it. So it's you put print, and after print, print, it has to be lowercase p. That's very important because it will give an error that it's not defined. And we'll talk more about error handling, so don't worry. And then you add quotation marks if you want to give a quote. So let's say you want a quote that's hello, one of the most popular commands. when humans talk. Hello. So yeah, it prints hello right here, as you see in the output. So this is the input box, this is the output box. And in the input box, you are the one who's trying to code the input, and the output will do everything else. So now we'll also talk about how we won't need quotation marks when we talk about variables. And we also don't even need quotation marks for other things like integers. But if you print hello without quotation marks, it will show an error because it will show the syntax error that hello is not defined because it's not a variable, and you need quotations because in most quotes, like Albert Einstein quotes, all those famous quotes, they only have like text with those quotation marks. And also, it doesn't matter what kind of quotes, it could be single quotes too. So these are strings, and it'll print it. Now, if you print integers, it'll just print 5. And for integers, it's an exception. It's optional using quotation marks. They'll still print the same thing, 5. Now, you can even do some artwork. You can play with print statements. Like, you can do... I'm not really good at art, but I can maybe make some things. So you can, when you play around and explore more, you can do a lot more stuff. And basically, and then you can print like a pyramid or something, and then you can finish the pyramid if you want. Print. And a faster way is that you can also duplicate lines, like copy and paste lines. And okay, this is how the pyramid looks at the end. And now I can just delete that. So basically, to make things faster, let's just comment it. The code will still be there, but won't show the output. So to comment, you do control. You do shift, and then shift 3, and then you can keep using it over and over again. Shift 3 for each one. Okay, so now we're done with print statements. So let's move on to variables. Variables, it gets a lot more interesting. So basically, variables are used to just store a value, whether it can be a text, integer, or Boolean value. And you can just simply call that variable anywhere in the code, where it's the beginning or the end. And there's another thing I want to reach out. The flow of Python is from top to bottom. So whatever comes first will be displayed first in the output. So it does it by order top to bottom. And basically, you can think of variables as just simple containers that you want to store for future use to like preserve those containers. It's like that. So let's actually get started. So basically, let's just define a variable A. So in a variable, let's get there. And basically, in a variable, it must start with a letter or an underscore. No spaces are allowed, and that's it. So here's an example of a variable: spam eggs, spam23, and underscore speed. So as I said, spaces aren't allowed. But if you want to include something in between, you can use an underscore, which is and then A. So basically, an example could be A equals 5. We don't have to do those advanced variables. You can just define A as 5. Then you can't just expect it won't print anything, or it won't display anything, but you have to call the print statement, because you can't just say that A equals 5 and expect it to be 5 be there. So you just do print A, and the value A represents 5. So I'll print 5. But if you print with quotation marks A, it'll print the letter A. just the letter A. But if you remove the quotation marks, it will print the value A, which represents 5. So that's how variables are so useful. And they'll also come in handy in several parts like strings and integers, and they'll come in handy. So another thing we can do is, okay, now we can even combine print statements and variables. So let's say A equals 5, print A. So let's just say, so I'm 13 years old, so I'm just going to put A equals 13, and we can just print my age is, and then we can close that, and then we can put commas. So you can either use comma or a plus to like add something, and in between those quotations, because as I mentioned before, A is, you need to store the print the value A, not the letter A, because it will just say my age is A years old. I want to print my age is 13 years old. So I'm going to put age and then another comma, because if you don't, it will show an error. And you can't just start another thing after without using a comma. So you must use a comma. So my age is the value age, the variable, or not age, A. A is the variable defined. You must use the same one, otherwise it will show an error. And my age is A and then years old. So now it'll print my age is 13 years old in the output. So that's just an example of how you can just combine print statements and input statements. And yeah, now we just can comment this and we can move on. And these will come in handy in the future. So it has to be in this kind of order, because then we'll actually need these in operators, strings, and input statements, and all those. So now we commented shift 3, and now we're going to move on to strings and integers. So strings and integers, so basically strings and integers are 2 of the 5 main data types in Python. Strings is basically text data, and integers is whole numbers. Like an example is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are integers. Those are whole numbers. And text is basically this, like hello, as we use in print statements. This is how like we apply these concepts from print statements, and that's just like text as you see in quotes. So, and then we'll use variables. So we're gonna create our like actual first like larger program, and this is gonna be like favorite sports player. So basically, let's define a variable fname, which is basically first name, and first name is gonna equal to Tom, and the last name is going to be equal to Brady. And now we can put a variable called full name, and that will basically equal to F name, or basically first name, plus L name, which is last name. And it'll basically combine those. So this is one of the operators, and there are a total of 7 operators, and the plus is one of those operators. And that basically combines both of them. And it actually won't print anything because we forgot to print that variable full name. Because the purpose of this statement, line number 10, this statement, is that it's actually defining the process behind it. And you'll need the process in order to print it. So this is probably the most important line in this code. So now we print full name. We don't print F name or L name. We print full name, the newly defined variable. And I'll print Tom Brady. And let me add a space in between. So if anybody doesn't know what Tom Brady is, he's a football player who plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so let's make this a bit better. So team, we can do another string. So we'll also cover integers when we talk about Tom Brady's number and his ranking and all those. So they're actually more numbers than strings, but we're just using strings. So now the team is going to be Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Or let's start with sport. Sport equals to football. It doesn't matter if it's double quotations, since it's a string and football. And then we can put the next one, which is team, which is equal to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't know if I spelled that right. And after the team, we can add just number. And Tom Brady's number has always been 12. So that's his jersey number. So because that's an integer, actually it's an integer, so we actually don't even need those. We can just simply say that the number is 12 without the quotations, since it's an integer. And that's actually the main differences between strings and integers. You don't need those quotation marks. So then, after that, we can run, but it'll still just say Tom Brady. We need to print those. Print sport, and then print team, and then print number. And it's actually going to show an error because number is not defined. I forgot to capitalize N, and it will just say an error that name number is not defined. Number is not defined because these two are different because it has to be capitalized. Now, I will say Tom Brady football, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and number 12. So that's an integer. So now we're done with strings and integers, and we applied so much. We applied strings, integers, print statements, and we even defined variables. In one program, we used 4 essential things in Python. And that's just really good. So now we're done with strings and integers. Now we can move on to operators. So basically, we already used an operator. We used the plus symbol, F name plus L name. That's basically combining two things. So let's just comment these. Shift 3. So this is part 1. We're gonna dive deeper into operators. I just wanted to show that you can not just variables you can add. You can also add integers. So let's say we want to define a variable a equals 5 and b equals 6. You can define multiple variables, and you can just keep going. And now you can print a plus b. It can be anywhere in the code. I'm just trying to prove that in Python you can do anywhere in the code the variables. So then it'll print 11, and no matter where it is, it'll print 11. So now if you want to do a minus b, it'll print -1. So it's kind of like its own calculator. You can as long as you define the variables, it'll work. If you just do, it can even work itself without the variables defined, but a minus b won't work, but you can do 5 minus 6. So that's something really cool in Python. And in part 2, we're going to be using, we're going to dive deep into operators, like how to multiply, how to divide, and then we can go into comparison operators. And comparison operators, just a head start, comparison operators compares two variables. Instead of adding variables, we're comparing variables. And then after that, we'll just dive deeper into Python. And thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video, and subscribe for part 2. Thank you for listening.